So you talked about you said that this attack on the Jews, this recently attack on the Jews, was worse than the Holocaust, right?
No, not worse than the Holocaust. The 7th of October was the worst massacre of Jews since the
Oh,
Holocaust.
since the
The
Holocaust.
Holocaust was on a scale that's nothing's been paralleled since maybe the days of Pharaoh. So almost 6 million Jews were massacred by the Nazis. In the 7th of October in Israel, there were 1,200 massacred. There were another over 200 kidnapped. There were children and women raped in the most graphic ways. The crimes that are now being recorded and are stomach churning. I was in Israel. I don't know when you were there, but I visited the sites of the massacre. I saw the press screening. I met with survivors, and the stories they tell and the images I've seen, I will take to my grave. So the scale of barbarity, the savageness of what happened, there's been nothing comparable to this that the Jewish people have been inflicted, subject to since the Holocaust.
I know about, I've heard about white people controlling other people and slavery and all that. And I heard about black people in Africa and other places enslaving other black people, the Arabs enslaving people, the Muslims. Have the Jewish people ever enslaved a group of people and killed them and punished them and were cruel to them? It seems like all races have enslaved somebody at some point, right? Have the Jewish people, I've never heard of the Jewish people doing that to anyone. Have the Jewish people in any time of any time of history, control a group of people and murdered them and raped them and made them work for nothing? Have they ever done that to a group of people?
So the Jewish people as a collective, no. But if you look, for instance, at the transatlantic slave trade, all people were involved. As you rightly say, there were black tribes that were enslaving, capturing other black tribes, selling them to European slavers. Amongst those European slavers, Jews represented proportional to their size within the population. So there was a small number of Jewish slave owners, financiers, but they were very small in number. And proportional to their size within the wider population. There's a great book by someone called, I've forgotten his first name, but Ferber, on the Jewish involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. Is very good. If you go back to the biblical period, slavery was endemic. It was everywhere. Nations enslaved other nations. And the Jewish religion came about and it gave a code of how you treat your slave. You have to set them free after a certain period of after a 7-year period. There's laws that regulate and protected what was called what the institution of slavery back then. So a slave who was within that system had greater protections under Judaism than any other society at that time. So again, it would be lying to say that Jews have never kept slaves, because anyone who reads the Bible can read that, well, this is how you set the slave free if you if a slave comes into your possession. So these are thousands of years ago, these laws. Certainly in the modern era, there's no such concept of slavery within the Jewish world. That Jews have been fundamental in almost all civil rights movements. And so when slavery existed within societies, Jews tended to just reflect what was happening in that wider population at that time.
Why are the Jews more liberal than they are conservative?
They are not. American Jews are more liberal than they are
Oh,
conservative. So half the world's Jews live in Israel, and Israel is quite a conservative place. Orthodox Jews, I'm an Orthodox Jew, tend to be much more conservative than liberal. And so American Jews do tend to skew more liberal, and they tend to vote Democrat more than Republican. But then when you look at the Orthodox in America will tend to vote more Republican than Democrat. So it's just which community. Jews are a diverse people. There'll be Jews that are watching this stream who'll be screaming at what I'm saying because I don't represent their views. We have an expression in Judaism: 2 Jews, 3 opinions. We're quite a divided people.
I noticed that with the black people, white people, the Mexican, Chinese, and others, they tend to share their wealth amongst other people, right? They're not as tight as the Jews, whereas the Jews tend to keep their wealth amongst Jews. They tend to keep their neighborhoods amongst Jews. They don't look like, unless I'm saying it wrong, they don't seem to share with others. Is that a wrong impression?
I think it's a wrong impression, and here's the test for you. If you Google who are the biggest philanthropists, so the most charitable people in the world, a huge percentage of them will be Jewish, even though Jews are disproportionately only a fraction of the world, like less than 1% of the world, yet we're amongst the biggest philanthropists. If you go to any hospital in America, you'll see wings dedicated by Jewish families. You go to art galleries,
But they're only Jewish hospitals. They're not like normal hospitals.
No. If you go to normal hospitals, if you go to universities, you'll find that Jews are huge donors to these institutions.
Okay. I thought they only did it for Jewish hospitals.
I'm going to blow your mind with this. As a Jewish person, I'm commanded to give away 10% of my money to charity. Now, there's ways you do that. You have to give to the wider community. So if I'm living in a nation, I live in the United Kingdom, I'm not a rich man, but I give money to British charities. I give money to Jewish charities. I give money to like my immediate community, people that I know that are in need. So in Judaism, it's kind of, you have to give to all of these people. If someone in your family needs, you need to help to support your family. If your community, the kahila that you live amongst, the neighborhood, they need, you give to that. You give to the wider Jewish community, and you also, most importantly, you give to the non-Jewish community, which is why so many of these institutions are supported by Jewish philanthropy.
Have you ever given to my nonprofit?
I haven't, but I can do.
Oh.
I wasn't aware of it, so I'll Google it, and if it reconciles with my values,
well, check out Bond. We're about family. We're about self-independence. Taking care of stuff rather than government, and start hating everyone. So check out Bond.
I will check it online. It sounds like it squares with my values, so I'll give it a look after.
I want to ask. One other thing. Then I got so much I want to ask you. One other thing. I noticed that anytime you have fear, when a person have fear, they're afraid of other people, or they're afraid of situations, they have fear inside, and most people do. I noticed that anyone that has fear bring trouble upon themselves, and all kinds of trouble. They bring it upon themselves because of the fear they have, the spirit of fear, and they bring on situations, they bring it upon themselves. I noticed that with the Jews, they seem to have fear that they're going to be attacked again in the way that it happened with the Holocaust. They've been forever afraid of that. And in having that fear like that, even when nothing was happening, is it possible that the fear of the Jewish people, they are bringing these situations upon themselves?
So no, fear is a very, very healthy emotion to have. We have it it's a survival mechanism. If you are in a lion's den and you're not fearful of the lion, you're going to get killed. It doesn't mean you have to leave the den. You can channel that fear and work out what to do in a situation. So the Jewish people, we have a history of persecution, but we've learned from that persecution, and we learn from that persecution. You're like, if you speak to any Jew today, any Jew, 2 words are the Jewish response that they will give you to the Holocaust: never again, never again. What does that mean? For a Jewish person, it means never again will we allow ourselves to be in such a vulnerable position where we are entirely dependent on other people for our salvation. So in the past, when tyrants rose up to massacre us, we were dependent on mighty powers to come to our assistance, a king to open its borders to us, a ruler to remove their boot from our neck. Today, that's not the case. Today, the Jews have a sanctuary. We have a safe haven, but more importantly, we have a military that is able to defend us. So we are not fearful, we are not cowardly, but we are aware of our history, and we have vowed never to let that happen again, which is why the state of Israel is so important for Jewish survival. The state of Israel ensures that never again will a Jew have to beg for our people's survival.
You said that fear is good, but fear is not of God. Fear is of Satan, of evil. And when Daniel was in the lion's den, one of the great things about Daniel is that he did not fear the lion. And I noticed that people who don't have fear, they have true power. And the power is not something you possess of yourself, but it comes from God, right? And those who do have fear lack power, and they're always doing different things to try to create power for themselves, try to make it happen. So fear is not of God. And since fear is, and I'm not talking about practical fear, going in the hood and getting beat up by some black guy or something. I'm talking about the other fear that lives in people who have anger. So fear is not of God. So if fear is not of God, how can it be good?
So I think we have a slight theological difference here. I see everything as coming from God. And I also see fear as an example. Both you and I imagine, have a healthy fear of heaven. The fear of heaven motivates us to do good in this world. And God, the Creator, blessed us with all of these emotions, from courage to fear. And there is within the Jewish philosophy, there is a time and a place for each of these emotions. None of these emotions should govern you. Not one emotion should consume you. You should have the healthy balance. You should be able to channel that fear into good decisions, courage, etc. So I half agree with you, but I see everything as coming from God.
But God does not give us the spirit of fear. That comes from evil. And because anyone that has fear has no peace. They have anger, they worry, they have suicidal thoughts, they get lonely, they are mad about this situation, and they are happy about this situation, they're mad about this. Because in fear, there is no peace. And if you notice, God was a dispassionate, or is a dispassionate God, and Satan is a passionate God. And so human beings who have fear, they're always looking for passion. They always try to be passionate about something because they're trying to find peace, perfect peace and passion, and you're never going to get it that way.
I think what you've described makes a lot of sense. The only thing I'd caveat what you said with is, imagine, let's say fear is from, it's not a Jewish belief, but let's just go with your example. Fear is from the devil. Now, if someone just discards fear, they no longer live in fear, they think they're invincible, and they go charging into a dangerous scene where they're just cut down by enemies that are far mightier. They refuse to take health advice because they see that as fearful and ungodly. And they are then consumed by some horrendous virus or disease. Fear can be very healthy when channeled appropriately, and I don't think that fear is. I think that kind of fear is a blessing from God, because it helps us to make calculated and reasoned and logical decisions that lead to better outcomes for us.
I see what you mean. What you don't realize is that when you lack the spirit of fear, you're not going to do anything crazy like that. You're going to have a clear mind. You will have common sense, and common sense protect you from doing crazy things. Whereas spirit of fear causes you to do crazy things, and it prevents you from seeing the right thing to do. It always make the wrong decision for you. But the fear to have perfect peace, you're going to always you're going to see and do it in the right way. You're not going to do crazy things. It's only when you have fear that you do and think. You think and you do crazy things. Let me ask us, do you believe that God has fear?
So I don't believe God has human emotions. In the tradition, the Jewish philosophical tradition I belong to, sorry, we're not allowed to attribute human characteristics to the divine. The Bible uses language to help us relate to it, of anger and jealousy and happiness, but that's so we can understand and comprehend.
But all those are evil emotions which come from evil, come from the devil.
The Bible uses that language to describe God in the Old Testament.
Well, maybe they talk about Satan, but not the real God. God, the real God is a dispassionate God. Let me ask, Christians, when I was growing up, Christians and Jews were tight. They were one because Christianity came about as a result of Judaism, right? And so when I was growing up, I was taught that, and I still believe that. And so, but look like there has been a division between the Christians and Jews that was not there unless I was too young to know or just didn't know. But look like there's a division between the Christians and the Jews that wasn't there when I was growing up.
So from a Jewish perspective, it's actually the inverse. So for centuries, Christians persecuted Jews. The Inquisition, they literally ripped our flesh off our bodies while we were still alive. They burnt us at the stake. Here in the UK, they put Jews in York to the stake 1,000 years ago.
Well, that's when the Jews were enslaving the Christians?
No, the Jews. So Jews were a tiny community. The Jews have never enslaved Christians. At least not to my knowledge. I'm sure someone in the comment will find some random community somewhere. But like Jews have never been in a position of power where they could enslave Christians. Christianity came about after Jews had any real sovereignty or power. It really emerged with the church fathers. And so what happened, Christians persecuted Jews throughout the ages. And if I were to tell my ancestors living in Europe that today your closest friends, the Jews' closest friends, are going to be the Christians, they would look at me like I was insane, because the only Christianity they knew was the ones that was chasing them down and chopping them in half with swords. And so the Jews today owe a great debt to the Christian community. Most people don't know this, but the fact that Jews are in Israel and Jews are in the UK is completely connected. Christians in the UK petitioned Whitehall, Cromwell, to allow the Jews into the UK so the Jews could then go from the UK to the Holy Land. And in this Christian theological view, it would bring on a messianic era where Jesus would reign for 1,000 years. This was a very common belief in the 16th and 17th century in the UK. And as a consequence, Jews are here in the UK. They then came from here to the UK and exported that very positive Judeo-Christian relationship to America. And ultimately, it resulted in Christians really pushing and getting behind the Jewish community, the Jewish national movement for self-determination in the Holy Land. And so Jews and Christians are very tight today, much more so than ever before. And we as Jews owe a huge debt to our Christian brothers.
Amazing. Are you a Zionist?
I am the biggest Zionist you will ever meet. I put Zionism on my cornflakes in the morning.
And so, for some reason, some people make the word Zionist seem like a bad word. What is a Zionist?
A Zionist is anybody that supports the right for the Jews to have a state in their ancestral land. Now, that does not have to be at the expense of anybody. It has nothing to do with any global cabals or any of this nonsense you'll read on 4chan. A Zionist is simply anybody, be they Jew or not Jew, that supports the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state. It's that simple. You can support the Palestinians and the Jewish state and still be a Zionist. Two-state solution, you're a Zionist.
Amazing.
One-state solution, is a Jewish state there, you're a Zionist.
Should, and I hear this a lot too, should Jewish people, or anyone, I guess, but especially Jews, should Jewish people be allowed to have dual citizenship?
That's for each nation to decide. If nations allow citizens to hold dual passports, then absolutely Jews should be able, or if they've got
let me ask the question this way, since I was told to ask. Do you agree that people with dual citizenship do not have America or Britain in their best interest? And their loyalty is usually to Israel. Is that true?
No. So imagine you've got a Canadian mother and an American father, and you have a Canadian and American passport. You may have an affinity to a stronger connection to one of those nations. You may be an American, but for whatever reason, you feel more Canadian. The one I've never understood, by the way, are the Irish in America, whose great-great-great-great-great-granddad came from Ireland, and they're more Irish than the Irish. But I think nationality is a very complex identity. So I'd imagine a devout Christian living in America would see themselves as a Christian first and an American second. Whereas a very strong American patriot who's also a Christian may invert that, and they may see themselves as an American first and a Christian second. When it comes to Israeli dual nationality, there are many, many dual nationalities in America. Pakistani American, British American, and nobody questions this dual loyalty other than when it comes to the Jews, who somehow have a dual loyalty to Israel. And that's when it moves into anti-Semitism. If you just blanket say anybody who has more than one passport, they have a dual loyalty, that's a fine statement. If you isolate out Jews and say any Jew, and it's only the Jews, by the way, it's not the Arabs, who has an Israeli passport, because there are 2 million Israeli Arabs, and there are Israeli Arabs that live in America. But if you're singling out the Jews and say they alone, the Jewish people alone, have this issue of dual loyalty, that's when it moves into anti-Semitism, rather than a healthy questioning of whether nations should allow citizens to hold two passports.